as a general programs coordinator at the Nevada County Arts Council. We're so delighted to be with you. Thank you very much to Blue Line Arts for hosting this along with Placer County Arts Council. We are neighbors, so we work together. And I'm very excited about that. So we always start our public events with an acknowledgement of our First Peoples, and I invite Patrick from Placer County.
We're going to allow one of our board members to join us.
Great, great.
Okay,
Lovely.
sure.
Thank you.
So we acknowledge that the land on which we occupy or sitting today, the occupied territory of over 100 tribes, Lisa and Mainu within the Placer County area. This land has been stewarded by indigenous people since time immemorial. We acknowledge the critical importance of the land and water to the indigenous people of California today, and that the existence of tribal communities and preservation of traditional indigenous way of life depend on secure and permanent land bases and the right of self-determination.
Thank you so much. The map that you can see on the screen is a map that we drew from UC Berkeley, and we assumed that because it was UC Berkeley, it was the definitive answer to all our questions connected with land acknowledgements, wherever we might be in upstate California. But just to note that it's a historical map that bases its rationale more on the linguistic relationships between tribes than specific tribal sense of place over time. So it's very, very broad based. I'm just going to go back to our initial slide. Would anyone like to read this aloud in such a way that those on Zoom can also hear?
Yeah, and just as a reminder too, if we can all like use our outside voices, because so this is the owl, which is picking up the audio and the video, and you know, I think most of the time people can hear us, but just to keep that in mind. So we use our outside voices.
Thank you. I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Yes. On behalf of the California Creative Works, we have an update from the upstate region, this Placer County. Experiences related to health are often determined by factors beyond the individual, such as environmental, policy, or culture. The arts have a critical and accessible role to play in tackling community conditions. What do you think?
Do we agree with that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
More than just taking our daily vitamins, isn't it? So we found out who's with us on Zoom, which is great, but I'd love to invite you to share. We're a nice small group today, which means we're going to have a really meaty conversation. Let's start over here. If you would like to share your name and any affiliation you'd like to.
I'm Janet Nicholson, and I am co-chair of the Placer Artists Tour.
Well, and congratulations. I hear it's been fabulous.
Thank you. Yes, our last weekend finished on Sunday and it was very busy. I know a lot of the artists are very tired. Our hearts are here.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
My name is Nick Vogt. That's spelled B-O-G-T, so it's got a German flavor to it. And I'm an artist, and I was on the tour, but I'm also a director of Christian Teen Ministries.
Fantastic. Thank you for all your good work.
Thank you.
My name is James Morrison. I'm a member of Blue Line and I have a photography business.
James, thanks so much for joining us. It's funny because you're wearing a mask. All I can see is your eyes and they just look fantastic.
Thank you.
And hello.
My name is Catherine High, and I'm a jeweler. I participated in the tour last weekend. And I'm also the admin for the Arts Council, Placer County.
Fantastic.
My name is Mary Tess Mayall. I'm a co-director at Blue Line Arts. And I love to do art on the side as well.
Brilliant. Art on the side. It sounds like a thing, doesn't it? We'll have to look more deeply into that.
Oh. Hi, good morning. I'm Tawana Armstrong, a board member for Arts Council of Placer County, also a member of Blue Lines Art. Glad to be with you.
Could you just say your first name one more time slowly so I can totally enjoy it?
Tawana.
Tawana.
Yes.
Thank you, Tawana.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon at this time. I'm Barbara Burge. I'm the chair of the Arts Council of Placer County. And my passion is art, but I'm also a certified interior designer by training and by art by training.
Thank you, Barbara.
And my name is Patrick Storm. I'm with Lemon Tree Agency. I am subcontractor for the Arts Council of Placer County for their PR and social media.
And you are a storm. I bet you get jokes like that all the time.
I'm much happier being a storm than anything else. I'll take it.
Exactly. Please continue. So what is the California Creative Corps? It's an economic and workforce recovery pilot program intended to fuel positivity, regain public trust, and inspire health and safety across California's diverse populations. So here we are at the end of a over 2-year global pandemic. In fact, a few days ago, we were in Sierra County on Friday morning in Weaverville, high up in the mountains. And Trinity, what did I say?
Sierra.
Oh my goodness, we haven't been to Sierra County.
You're going to a few
But
counties.
such a faux pas.
Yeah.
I'm already having sort of cognitive dissonance. So I think Placer County is now 15, something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
today is the 16th.
16 county, it's amazing. But we're actually we're gonna do another one in Placer County, so we challenge you to stay tuned. We thought we would dip into Kings Beach because, for reasons that we'll share, in a little while. But so while we were in Weaverville last Friday, the Arts Council Executive Director, everywhere we go, we are hosted by the Arts Council, had COVID. So obviously, you know, COVID hasn't finished yet, but the pandemic part has, and we know it's been devastating, both to lost lives and families and communities, and the arts specifically. So the last time we had a very severe national, I'm thinking of the Great Recession. Has anyone heard of the Works Progress Administration, the WPA? Right, so it was born on the heels of the Great Recession, lasted all the way through to part of the way through the Second World War under President Roosevelt, and he created under what he called the New Deal, the WPA, under which millions of unemployed Americans are put to work, and among them artists across 4 different disciplines. So visual arts, theatre, literary arts. What was the other one? Anyone remember? It must have been music. I'm just going to say it was music. And it was an incredible success. And the idea was very much, as you see here, the idea of regaining public trust, having faith in civic society. What does civic engagement, community engagement, social justice, what do we want our America to look like on the heels of a Great Depression? Of course, artists always put a sort of ironic spin on things, and some of the projects that came from the WPA weren't quite what the federal government expected. And here we are 100 years on with a program that has been inspired by the WPA. And then what we're going to do is encourage you to think beyond the WPA. What is the context today in the what are we in the 21st century? and what are we grappling today? What makes a WPA style program relevant for Placer County? So let's move along. What we're going to be doing today is sharing a lot of data and a lot of information, and your head might spin and you'll start looking towards the door. You'll want to leave, but please hang in there, because what we want to do is turn it to you and hear from you about what's important and relevant and what your lived experiences are versus what the data tells us. So the Nevada County Arts Council is among 14, I got it wrong, it's 14 other organizations across California who've been charged with dispersing almost $60 million of workforce development funds from the state. We applied because we felt passionately about rural upstate California, and we wanted the monies to be distributed from an arts perspective. So I believe in other parts of the state, we have wonderful organizations like United Way participating in administering these funds. We wanted no such thing for upstate California. It must be the arts, right? So we applied and California Arts Council have said that there are particular things that are of interest. All of them placing the artist at the forefront of issues that are critical to society. So let's create public awareness related to water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, emergency preparedness, relief and recovery, and civic engagement, social justice and community engagement, and public health awareness. You'll see that next to civic engagement, I included election participation. This was actually stated by California Arts Council as an example of one marker for community health. And one thing we'll do today is look at why these specific elements of community health, what have they got to do with health? In this particular case, election participation, I'm guessing, has to do with an individual's sense of autonomy and freedom within society, and an individual's way to experience having a voice and contributing to a democracy. But if a person doesn't feel safe within that opportunity, then perhaps that's something for a group of artists or a partnership to create an awareness campaign around, for example. So this is California according to the California Creative Corps. Naturally, the upstate region is the yellow region. Clearly, it's the largest geographic region with the largest number of counties, 19 in all. The next region down, the next in terms of size, would be the Central Valley region with only 11. It's a fascinating grouping of counties, and we'll let you draw conclusions onto how those regions have been decided by the state as we go on. Of course, there are many ways of looking at the upstate region. The map on the left here shows the map as determined by another big program of funding, workforce development funding, that the state's rolling out right now, parallel to the California Creative Corps, called the California Economic Resiliency Fund. If any of you have any connection with SURF, as it's known, I totally encourage you to get engaged, because the SURF folks are very interested in what the arts are doing, and there may be matched funding for projects in Placer County with your local SURF representatives. And then, of course, we've looked at the tribal maps. Tribal lands have no relationship to county lines. They came first. So when we're looking at projects to fund, arts projects to fund, we might want to think beyond county lines, and maybe we create discretionary funds that can serve regional needs. The map, I love this at the bottom, and because Katrina's with her, I'm going to draw upon her to describe what that lovely green and red and orange, the autumnal looking map shows.
Well, one of the greatest things about getting to visit this whole upstate region is we're moving, from one spot to another, and the relationships of different areas aren't so much determined always on county lines. Of course, it's also determined about water and how water flows. And so the map is really just showing if a drop of rain fell, what watershed area would it drain out? So anything in the green eventually goes out towards the ocean. The yellow zones is this massive region that drains out through the Sacramento River, which Placer County is obviously part of. And then the reddish orange goes out into the Great Basin. But it's definitely been confirmed as we've gone through, and now we're at county number 16, that these are really important relationships. And even some of these counties, have a lot of their water leaving their entire basin to go into another area. And so looking at how we all relate to each other and work with each other, and what are the opportunities around water.
So for example, in Nevada County, those of us who live in Nevada County think of the Yuba River as distinctly ours, filled with beautiful watering holes that we don't want anyone else to discover. There's actually, if you follow the Yuba River down, it meets the Feather River and as a confluence in between, in Sutter and Yuba counties. And there are massive homelessness issues. There are a whole sort of counterculture, unintentional counterculture cities. It's a massive issue, homelessness. So there's extraordinary ways that we can view possible, regional projects as we go forward. Thank you, Gianna. And then of
Yeah,
course.
and Eliza, real quickly, just while you're on that, I just really want to flag, because Placer County, as our neighbor, we're strongly connected as well, because quite a bit of Yuba River water comes into your basin. So I would encourage, which means you're very much connected even more so to Yuba County and the mouth of where the Yuba comes in. So just really be thinking in terms of larger watershed relationships, because we're also connected, especially with you all, our neighbors.
And as we go forward, between now and the time that we open up the grant applications in the early spring, we're talking sort of February, early March at the latest, we'll want to be using this time to sort of garner our partnerships together. And it'll be great for individual artists, artist collectives, and partnerships between artists and arts organizations, or artists and social service organizations, or artists and units of government, to be mobilizing among themselves. But there'll also be a role that us arts councils can take in gathering as perhaps regions on Zoom to discuss possible partnerships that could draw larger pots of funding to support programs. And of course, the map on our right is, it's a roadmap. This is how we understand properly how we can get around, but also how communities relate to one another through transport or old trade routes across mountain ranges, etc., etc. So the upstate region in all, 19 counties, 31% of total California geography, but only 4.2% of the population, 3 primary hydraulic regions, that's watersheds, enormous variances in precipitation, ranging from 14 inches a year in MoDOT to 95 in parts of Del Norte, and then from sea level to the top of Mount Shasta at 14,000 feet, and a mixed economy of agriculture, timber, ocean, fisheries, mining, tourism, energy. We're providing these really basic, obvious details to you, because later, when you receive this, and we're going to be sharing it in both Spanish and English, you'll be able to draw upon this data to sort of let it inspire projects and collaborations. So how on earth could a single agency possibly hope to remain relevant and connect in a 19 county region? And this is why we asked Patrick and the Arts Council of Placer County to work with us alongside all our other county arts agencies across the upstate region. It's a perfect network that's already in place. And our hope is that through this network, we will more equitably represent and engage with our diverse populations. Quite frankly, I can't think of another way we could have done it unless it was with our peers. So today we're going to be introducing a new tool called the Healthy Places Index. It was developed by the California Alliance of Public Health Alliance of Southern California. Don't be put off by the southern bit. I say slightly tongue-in-cheek, because so much of this good data and these studies come from urban areas, and we want you to challenge us again. When you see this data and when we tell you what Placer County looks like according to the data, you'll be saying, but that's not our experience. We know stuff that this map, those people that put this map together don't know. And we want you to challenge it, like the map versus lived experience, right? But when you're putting together grant applications, we'll want you to both acknowledge the data and challenge it, in a way that we can defend. Does that make sense? So we'll do a live demonstration of the map in a second. And here's Placer. Population. Yeah, do you want to speak to this, Katrina?
Yes, I'm not sure if Gianna has the most up-to-date one. Hopefully yours doesn't have yellow highlighted text. And for those of us on Zoom,
I quickly removed the yellow highlights. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, but those of us on Zoom are seeing the other. So just erase that from your head. But yeah, when we come into each county, just know that we want to understand the best we can, you know, what's going on there? What's the understanding, not only the population and the cities and the actual size, understanding, you know, the whole topography, geography, watersheds, again, specific smaller watersheds, because understanding, obviously with Placer, you're much like Nevada County, where, you know, you have these two large watershed basins, you know, one at the top that drains a whole other direction into the Great Basin territory, and one that comes out the Sacramento River. So looking at that, also understanding public and private lands, since that has a big influence on some of the resources that are available. We found in some counties with very large amounts of public lands, they had actually a lot less resources because of a lack of a tax assessment basis, not getting the tax revenue. We look at indices that involve college and bachelor's education. So understanding what college opportunities are available. Does someone have to actually leave the county to pursue a four-year education, or even a two-year education in some counties, as we saw in Modoc? Understanding as well the tribal lands in the area, as well as the county resource groups and the different groups that artists might be want to engage with to get more data, to work more specifically on various issues. And I'll let Eliza and Patrick speak more to that one.
And then, of course, the community resource groups, all this, we want to share back with you to just prompt you to consider partnerships, especially if you are considering a more regional size or scoped project. You know, partnerships will help bolster your application. And although there'll always be a lead partner, having solid partnerships builds capacity for artists who are paying. It's actually great that Gianna has the version that has the yellow highlights, because it's real. We want you to share with us. So for those of you on Zoom, if there are community resource groups that you feel are missing, for example, I'd love to know if there are any community resource groups that are more connected with cultural equity, such as LGBTQ groups, BIPOC-centered groups. Who have we not listed here? Who's not at the table? And then if you could make sure that we grab those from and add it to them. So it's really important for us. And yeah.
We could stay here all day listing all of them, but the Art League of Lincoln is definitely very important. Very important partner for the arts in Placer County, and especially with how we know when we'll see the helping index, that there are a lot of areas in Lincoln that definitely need our assistance.
Are you wanting us to share this now? Or is
Yeah, I would.
okay, so there's a P flag too, which is an LGBTQ community.
What was it called?
P flag. P-F-L-A-G.
Yes, we had that in Nevada County. Yeah,
Yes, Sierra Native Alliance.
great. This is a great way of doing it, isn't it, Katrina? Live input.
Then there's the hip hop convention up in
Hip Hop
Congress convention.
Good call.
Up in Auburn, and I'm familiar with them.
We're on the line. Yeah, we actually had
Good.
Auburn Hip Hop Congress.
Great.
Yes.
Natalie, Polly, and Angela.
They apply a lot for grants. And when I was reviewing grants, that was one of the first.
Yeah,
grants I
welcome
was.
Natalie and Angela.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. They're on.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, the Auburn Symphony.
Yes.
They partnered with us on it.
Yes.
Placer Land Trust too is very social justice minded and culturally aware. They definitely should be at the table, I think.
What's the name?
Placer Land Trust, and we did type it into the chat.
Yes, I see. That's great.
And they're actually listed there, luckily. I feel
Oh,
like
good.
we got one.
Yeah,
Oh, good, they are.
the
Perfect.
Placer County Water Agency is, Placer County Water Agency is a good one too, and Protect American River Canyons.
Gianna's writing as fast as she can. Are you catching this, Gianna?
Yes,
I can-
thank you,
And we have
everybody.
a
for their-
Also share my nonprofit that's doing work with the Black student unions here. See My Child, small S-E-E, capital M, capital Y, child. All one word.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So you will see that intergenerational learning is a key, could be, might be a real component of some of the projects. We love intergenerational learning.
I want to also mention one more, so it's recorded as well. It's a partnership we have with another organization that's actually out of Sacramento that actually comes into Placer County as well, called Aging Up, that facilitates children that are in the foster system, that they have a network built up so that they're not just aging out of the system, they're aging up and they have a network of people to support them and mentor them.
This is fantastic. I am so glad for our imperfections because it leads to a much more interesting listening session where we actually are learning from you. That's great. So if during this session you think of any others, please let Gianna know. And likewise, please put them in the chat box for those Zoom participants.
I have a couple too. The Roseville Police Activities League. They have a
Yes.
new executive director.
Yes.
They're over here in Roseville near the grounds.
Yeah.
The Boys and Girls Club, they just opened up a new location here in Roseville. So we
Great.
have to start working with them.
Roseville Theater and Arts,
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
the Roseville Theater.
Auburn State
Academy.
Theater,
Mhm.
yeah.
And then,
Fantastic.
we have partnered with another nonprofit in Sacramento called Pro Youth and Families.
Very good.
And they, yeah.
They
so,
have some chapter here.
Yes, they've been expanding outside of Sacramento. We've been partnered with them.
Yes, great. So it makes me think in a very practical way, say a group artist or an artist wanted to partner with an organization, one of these community resource groups or a social service organization. Within the upstate region, what we'd want to see is that the lead partner was within the upstate region. So it'd be great to list them as a partner, but not to have them as a lead partner unless they were actually here. Just a note. So that's fabulous. That's really good.
Brooke also shared with us, Health Education Council and Wellness Within.
Yeah,
Thank you, Brooke.
that's great.
And right, because when it is in a Sacramento chapter, it just shows more that we do have that local need as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
It's not that we just haven't got it yet.
Exactly,
So, yeah.
exactly. And this is particularly classic in rural areas where we might be supported as a sort of, not an afterthought, but we're an extension of someone's remit in a more rural urban center. So moving on, this incredibly beautiful but terrifying map shows a 100-year history of fire. It only extends, I think, up until 20. We know what it is, Katrina, is it 2020?
And it's 2020, but it does, yeah, in some cases, it doesn't include all of it that I can tell. I found a couple of things, but yeah, 2020.
So what you see is going back in time, the cooler colors, the greens, the smaller blobs, if you like, are the older fires. So what does that tell you? Fires are getting bigger, more catastrophic, harder to stop, harder to prevent, harder to manage. And so we share this again as a clue in terms of projects. Is there anything you wanted to add to this about the area that is circled, which is essentially Placer, Katrina?
Yeah, I think you're going to see in a couple more slides. There's a reason that we bring a lot of this fire information forward, not just because as we spent time in the upstate region, we firsthand come to see so much of the damage, but the opportunities once again for thinking as Eliza was inviting for the original New Deal part of the project was where do we want to go in 50 years? So what will we be seeing within the upstate region? What is the role of artists in this, but all of us in envisioning as we go forward? So I think most of all, it's, as you can see, the fires are much, much larger, much bigger and massive. So we'll talk more about what that is. And Eliza has a lot to share on that too.
Katrina really is a scientist. She is a creative person. And on Sunday, I'm going to be leaving for a short period of time, and Gianna and Katrina are going to be leading the last 2 or 3 sessions. And Katrina said, "Oh my God, I wonder what to say about the arts." She's great. She relates everything she understands from the Healthy Places Index and from what we share with you to the arts. And she increasingly is challenging us as an arts organization to marry our ideas with these critical issues. This one completely blows me away. Do you want to speak to this one, Katrina?
I'm gonna find it. Oh, okay, good. Now I can see. Is that the one she's on? Okay. This is all just much more recent fires. Again, though, I couldn't find on this one the mosquito fire. So again, it's pretty hard to stay up to date, right? Because every year, and that was huge for your area.
Yeah.
But again, it's just a real part of your landscape of all of our living, you know, with the smoke impacts and everything. And I as a area, as upstate area, we're going to give a lot of feedback to the use of the Healthy Places Index, in that there is nothing that really captures this scale that is so much about all of our living and our experience, especially in the summer and the fall.
We were in Siskiyou County exactly a week ago in Wairika, and we moved the next day from Wairika to Happy Camp and then up towards the Oregon border before we got caught in the snow. But one of the things that the Arts Council was able to share that we couldn't possibly have known about their fire history is that the most recent fires in the Klamath region, you know, forced 90% of the BIPOC communities living in the forested area that was devastated out of the county. That's a huge deal. It's displacement, it's climate refugee conversations. These things lend themselves to incredible projects that relate to narrative and story. Whatever kind of artist you are, whether you're a visual artist, a digital artist, a filmmaker, a musician, theatre, there's a role to play in telling these stories.
Well, and we haven't even hit possibly the most catastrophic part of all this also is we're still coming into the rainy season, and the watersheds are incredibly fragile. And if we have mudslides and everything else, it's another devastation in the communities.
Right, exactly.
Well,
so
as you go into this, Eliza, I'll take it. And I actually do see the huge role of the yellow text for inviting, because this is, again, are you on the American River Watershed one?
yes.
Yeah, and we'll have the old version, so.
Yeah, that's
So,
good.
well, and I also, she will never let you know this, but one of the things is Eliza came off of 5 days of us on the road. I can't even tell you how long those days were, being up in all those counties. Came back, had 2 enormous proposals. She spent all weekend long working. And so I'm just going to tell you within this, it's like, I actually think it's really wonderful to come on in and just be able to let you know, this is exactly, we want to know from you, what are the biggest issues? What other issues have we missed? I would always I've been very involved with work on in the American River watershed. So that's why I put this placeholder slide here too. Because everything to do with our water and what's happening with our watersheds and our water supply, it's strongly related to fire. It's strongly related to communities and what we're seeing. So you get to share also, what are the big topics? And as you're thinking of going forward in the next 50 years, where are the opportunities to really hit at what makes Placer County a healthy place?
Yeah.
Well, and once on the watershed as well, one of the things that was unintended consequences, we in the past had a lot of the safety power shutoffs. And in one of those cycles, they realized that since there was no need for power generation, that they also turned off the water irrigation channels because they weren't sending water through the dams. And so our agricultural community was impacted because that's how they handle the water for their fields and their orchards. So that can be incredibly devastating to the entire economy. And we're losing crops as well.
So pretty soon, we see incredibly strong correlations between the way our forests are managed, the way our watersheds are cared for and are affected by that, and clean air and clean water. It's a big deal. Another big deal, which we're so grateful to the California Healthy Places Index for, is that it shares very clearly the correlation between race and ethnicity and healthy outcomes for communities. We know this already anecdotally, but we encourage you when you're putting together your project applications, please show an awareness for what you're receiving in terms of the data around race and ethnicity into your applications. We really encourage that. it's very clear that overall Placer County has a high population of Hispanic and Latino. Bear in mind, these are 2020 census. The 2020 census, the census in general, leaves much to be desired in terms of its breakdown of race and culture. And so you might want to fill in those gaps, right? So if there's something in there that isn't necessarily visible via this data that you know, again, call it out. So this is what the Healthy Places Index looks like. And if you look at that map, and same for you on Zoom, you're looking at two colors. You're looking at blue and green, dark blue, light blue, dark green, light green. And then you're looking at these stripy diagonal areas. Those areas are exclusion zones. They're areas with populations of either under 1,500 or perhaps, institutions with large institutions with dormitory style living, such as prisons, for example. On the eastern side of the state, upstate, we're seeing a big exclusion zone there. That's possibly Lassen County with its big prisons. We don't think that this means you shouldn't create projects around populations that you know reside within exclusion zones. If there are things that you know that it hasn't captured, again, it's your lived experience versus what we're learning. We're learning a lot when we go from county to county. So which of those color coded areas do you think are the most healthy, according to the Healthy Places Index? Take a guess.
Dark green.
So the dark green areas, do you think? Why do you think that is? Why do you think those people are healthier? Those communities are healthier?
You have more money.
More money. And also, one thing leads to another. They have a greater access to resources and opportunity. And that idea of access and opportunity is so important. Even if opportunity is there, it doesn't mean that it's equitable if folks don't have access to it. Does that make sense? I love that, thinking of the difference between what equality is, where yes, everyone is allowed to, is given the same rights, but if they don't have access or they don't know how to access them, that's not equity, is it? So looking at this, it tells us that relatively good health outcomes in these urban centers. And I wonder if that little sort of green, more or less green area that divides upstate from the others, do you think that's the I-80 corridor? Retail density, hospitals, transport, education. Yeah, exactly. So pretty soon you're able to draw correlations, and we're just providing the clues for you. And so Placer County would be in that area. You're along some major routes where you do have access. And yet, as we will see, there are some exceptions to that, and it's the exceptions that you want to be finding. Here's a closer look at the upstate region. And Katrina, do you want to speak to why census tracts, when you land in the Healthy Places Index, you can immediately see they're not defaulting onto county lines. These are census tracts. But Katrina, why?
I will here I put the thing I will definitely let you know that Eliza has mastered so much of this. Is the best part of working with an artist. I have learned so much from her, and she is learning so much in all of this. So just nudge her at any time, but I will totally let you know what it says right there too, is that, we need to be able to have a way to compare data over time and have some continuity. So having boundaries that don't change, and they're relatively permanent boundaries with census tracts. They are merged sometimes and split up. So it's a unit of measurement that can give us the most continuity over a really long period of time. Now, granted, we only get the census data every 10 years, and there's a lot of other changes and subtleties that aren't captured. So we understand those limitations as well.
Exactly. And when we do open up the Healthy Places Index map, which we're about to, you can see that there are other ways to look at the data. You can look at it by city, you can look at it by county, you can look at it by congressional area. or legislative areas, for example, but for some reason, it all that makes much more sense if you look at it by census, but you see what you think. Here are the markers for health that the California Healthy Places Alliance considers when it is determining the relative health of communities. And this is an overarching look at Placer. And of course, Placer has how many census tracts? I'm trying to remember.
I'll have it right here.
85 census tracts, yeah. So a lot of scale and relativity is needed. This is your overall Healthy Places Index score, but there are 85 census tracts, and this is like the mean average of all of them. So you're looking really good, essentially. Transportation, surprisingly, is kind of on the edge there. Clean environment is being pulled down a lot. That's probably particulate matter from transport routes, I'm guessing. I have no idea, but we can go into them. And we wanted this to be like your sort of 101 of the Healthy Places Index when you're alone studying this late into the night. Do you want to speak to Placer County in more detail?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, it's really interesting looking at the upstate overall. And I mean, 32 dark green tracts, that's incredibly exciting. There's a lot that's going on in Placer County that obviously is doing really well. So learning from both the dark blue areas, the lowest percentiles and the highest, is really valuable because there's a lot of ways for collaborating within your county overall. But the thing that really stands out about Placer County that is something so known to you all, but to see it in the scale of data, the huge range of per capita income, that really gets to what we have here is a generalization for Placer County. So this is where, using that HPI map, we're looking at Placer County as a whole. And you can imagine, by averaging such extremes as a minimum per capita income of 22,000 with a maximum of 94,000 a year per capita income, that's a really big scale and range to average. So it's going to be, the information when you go into specific tracks is going to get a lot more to the real trends. So always, I just call it, always be careful of the averages. But the other thing that I sort of called here about Placer County, I had to dig deep to look for the dark blue, which, boy, isn't that the coolest thing? It's like coming from a physical and learning how healthy you are. So, but there are areas of dark blue, and as a generalization, these are the generalization ones for the county. But the clean environment one is something that we're also quite familiar with in Nevada County. It was from ozone levels, which, you know, we get that. That's where in the direct airflow, our two counties, of all the driving patterns and conditions from such use from the Bay Area as well as Sacramento, and it blows up against the Sierra, and it's held in. Ozone is a byproduct from primarily automobiles, and it just sticks against the mountains up there. And I don't know if you've ever recalled having days where you didn't want to let your kids' very young lungs go outside because of high ozone levels. So that was a big thing that stood out for the county overall. Otherwise, to draw out, I think it's going to be most useful when we look at specific tracks, but you'll have this cheat sheet, so it sort of shows you a little bit of what stood out for the county overall. What does matter the most looking at county trends, again, is when you do find a track that might have some real limited resources, and if the county is doing really well in that area, then there should be some county resources that really are tried and true and might be able to assist with the issue. In some places we went to, the lowest tracked scores were parallel with the county, which was dark blue for the same indices. And that's a little more challenging. That's where needing to look a little more broadly beyond the county resources becomes important.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katrina. And here we just asked our designer to do an overlay to make it more simple to compare. And again, you will have this. So you can see Placer County at first glimpse looks pretty good on the Healthy Places Index. So in order to benefit from funds from this project, you're going to really want to hone in on those tiny dark blue areas and think about what this means and how you could, as a community, rally around those dark blue areas and bring them back. So I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna just get out of here and do a live.
Definitely have some dark blue in Auburn, in Roseville,
Yep.
Lincoln, and the area.
Sure.
And Sheridan, thank you.
So on the screen, I'm now showing the Healthy Places Index, and we're going to click on that white button and it'll take us to the map. But just to go back to the index for a moment, these things called policy action guides up here, they're really, really helpful in terms of driving narrative in applications. Because they're the why bits. Do you know what I mean? Like what's employment, what's income, what's preschool enrollment or bachelor's education or high school enrollment or census response or transportation or any of these things. What's it got to do with health? This is where you go to find that. And you can also find it within the map itself. Let's go to that map now. It's going to load. And here's
And-
California. Yeah. Trina.
And while she's loading that, I'll let you know that the two tracks that had the lowest scores that I'd encourage we start with, and then your curiosity can drive Eliza to all kinds of tracks. But I'd say either to do the track 201.07, which is by Kings Beach and Brockway. That's the one that actually has the lowest overall score with some specific areas that have been identified here. And then the other next lowest one is by Roseville area, but near the Timber Creek Golf Course. And that, so I don't know which one you would like her to look at first, but I'd suggest starting with one of those.
Do we all agree that we'll first start with the dark blue tracks? We can also go, like you see those areas that are also pale blue, this in the middle of Auburn and other parts of, there's Lincoln as well. There's a reason that they're pale blue. There'll be some dark blue in there too. And we're kind of dumbing down for our own purposes so that the data doesn't drive us mad. You know, words like dark blue and light blue, which you understand to mean connected with lower health outcomes. So where would you like me to start? There are two very dark blue areas here, and then there's Kings Beach up here. Is there anyone from, oh, I've lost it now. Is there anyone from Kings Beach on the call today? Yeah, let's go up there and have a quick look, shall we? There it is, that tiny sliver right beneath an area of affluence and positive healthy outcomes. So what you do is you click on these areas, and then on the left-hand side will be a panel called community conditions. And there you get your analysis. And you can see it's right down there in the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index. You scroll down more to find out exactly why. These are all your policy action areas, your markers for health. And I'm going to keep scrolling down until you find what I was referring to earlier. And you can see what the racial composition is for that particular area, Kings Beach. 33% Hispanic. That's significant. Is that a project? You know what I mean? How can we lend voice to work with our Latinx community up there, et cetera, et cetera. What would you like me to look at? If I go back up, let's have a look at some of these indices. We have those that you're going to want to look at, perhaps are education, social, transportation, housing, and healthcare. Do you want to choose one?
Look into housing.
Okay, glad you said that. I was on a call this morning of the California Arts Council. It's endemic throughout California housing. It's absolutely, the housing thing is extreme. I think I'd be so happy if I saw lots of applications that connected with, you know, artists with housing, whether it's housing for artists or how artists are shining a light on possible solutions for housing issues. Here you go. So the lowest indices here are low income homeowner, severe housing cost burden, and housing habitability. Do you want me to look more deeply into one of those areas? Should we go into this one here? It's the lowest of all. Do you want to speak to these percentages, Katrina?
You mean how it relates to, I mean, I think most of all with this, I want to have everyone sort of notice how it compares to the county, because that's always a flag. I mean, one thing that's really interesting that stands out especially for this tract up by Kings Beach. It has one of the highest employment. We have been traveling all over Northern California, and it is the 99.6 percentile for employment. So, and that's not something we've seen. So, and yet we still have obviously these conditions. Now, any of us who've spent time up there in the Lake Tahoe area understand a lot of the reasons that might be. You'll notice all of the Placer County tracts up there by Tahoe are actually exclusion zones because of population, the amount of people that are listed as living there as a full-time home. So we're really only getting the glimpse into Kings Beach, but I suspect there's some of what's going on here is happening within this whole region. So, but what else did you want me to get at, Eliza? I think you.
That's great. And just to show, remember I said a great way of finding the why for your narrative sections of a proposal is by looking at the policy action areas in the Healthy Places Index. But they're also here, like if you burrow down, it'll share with you what's the connection to health of low-income homeowners, severe housing cost burden. All residents should be able to afford adequate housing without giving up healthy food, medical care, or other necessities, or accepting unsafe housing conditions. High housing costs and housing instability are associated with increased stress and depression, communicable diseases like tuberculosis, and decreased children's well-being and education outcomes. And this is where another clue for artists might feel passionately and have amazing technical capacity to create public awareness and vision, but they may need a little help from a social service organization or a unit of government that's actually working in some of those areas. Does that make sense? And then together, putting their heads together, that can lend the artist or the artist collaborative capacity to drive those messages. Does that make sense? So all these are clues for you.
So I think the other thing with this, before you leave this tract, I would say, if you go back out, along with having a very low score in healthcare, I think why don't you pull up education, Eliza, because this one was so much lower than county averages. And this is the one where getting in there and finding out from the people, what is this about? You know, what could be done? As Eliza says, yeah.
Just to be clear, when I first looked at education on the Healthy Places Index, I assumed that if I couldn't answer why, for example, low high school enrollment, it must be because lots of folks are being homeschooled. No, those folks are still counted, so it's not that. We've been asked that question a lot. But here we go. Right, let's click on that high school enrollment. And can you explain how high school enrollment, Katrina, compares in this tract with the rest of the state?
You mean what you have on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's your numbers looking at it. I mean, it's the 0.1 percentile. That means that 99.9% of tracts in California have a higher score for this indice, the percent of 15 to 17-year-olds in school. So that's a really big flag. That is a project. That is something.
Yeah. I do feel like we had talked about before that it's a bit of a red herring.
Yes.
Because the population up there is, most people are not full-time residents. There's so many houses that are
Secondary residences.
secondary residents, yeah, they may not have a family or a community in the same sense that other parts of California do.
Great. So you've done exactly what I asked you to do at the beginning. You've challenged the data, because we could be getting ourselves really worked up and simultaneously excited about creating a project around this, only to find out, well, there's actually a reason. It's because of the huge number of second homeowners. If you're sure about that, that's great. But if you feel like it's a clue to go deeper with something,
Well, I think
that's great too.
I think going deeper with this, you want to look at that Hispanic population, because those are the people who serve the restaurants and resorts. Yeah, and that's where I think the issue is for housing.
So perhaps housing and less education. This is great. This is why we do these listening sessions. Okay, so now we're
I'm
gonna go down.
curious if there is even an elementary school or a high school in that Kings Beach area.
Eliza,
Yes.
I'm just,
Oh, there is.
Yeah, so I think somebody wants to speak.
Yes, please.
It's, you know, they're all Title IX schools and the ELL is very high. And there's also a very high dropout rate, and it's all a number of pressures of housing and low income from all of the service industry families there, making the lowest wages and having the most difficult time subsisting. It reflects on the schools and the children.
That means with that population, more young folks drop out of school earlier so they can go to work in that industry because they can get work in that industry so they can help pay the rent because the rents are exorbitantly high in most areas.
So there is a connection, but it's just not a linear kind of connection. That connection depends upon your local knowledge, doesn't it? In a way, this is where it gets juicy, I think.
Exactly. Interviews.
Exactly. So.
And this is also one, Eliza is doing the listening tour. We're headed up to do a specific one in Truckee, and people involved with this community will be invited to join that as well, because obviously their neighbor right next to them have some ways that they've addressed education and some similar pressures. So again, don't ever feel constricted within county boundary lines, because there's a lot of opportunity in the region overall up there.
Of course, and especially in that region where, isn't it, it's the Placer Office of Education that actually caters to the Tahoe Truckee School District, isn't it? So I know this because I direct Nevada County Arts Council, but when we do poetry out loud each year, it feels so weird that we're not serving kids in the eastern part of our county because you're doing it. Good job. So anyway, should we look at these couple of these very dark blue areas in Roseville?
We're just so everybody knows we're at 12:35.
Okay, great. So we have another half hour.
Yep.
Good, 25 minutes. Okay, I'll be very well behaved and move on.
You're doing one.
Yeah, Eliza, maybe go to track 210.4. It'll be that blue one in the sea of dark green all around it.
Yeah, that's right. So I remember that Janet pointed out something about this tract before. Janet, can you remember what it was?
I believe it's the golf course.
Yeah, because you can see where there's the no streets in the middle of that section.
Right.
That's the golf course that we so.
So you don't normally associate golf courses and people who live around golf courses with lower healthy outcomes, do you? So what's going on here?
Right. That's also Sun City, isn't it?
Yes, it's also a retirement community
Community,
that's 65 plus.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So not a lot of high school enrollment there.
So you think, again, this is like a red herring, as we would say. It's like, no, it looks like we should focus on it, but maybe not, right?
Right.
So then you might think, well, some of these pale blue areas have more to offer in terms of projects. Do you want to, should we have a look at the other one?
Sure.
Is this the hospital around here?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a hospital on
I-
Douglas Boulevard.
And the album.
And Natalie has another
Southern.
comment here too, that says in our area, there's not an exit interview process to identify and address dropping enrollments. We're hoping to influence the board to implement something. This could be a model for other areas to look at.
Interesting, very interesting. Where would you like me to look at before we go into the kind of, I'll put this all to side and I'll give you a little bit more information on how we think the grants will be created and the size and shape and considerations. Is there anything else you want me to look at?
Not the dark blue area in Roseville, on the lower right.
That was the one around the hospital. This one?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Kaiser and Album Mall, et cetera.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, just because there's no school.
Yeah, well, it's just because it's such a high concentration of commercial property.
It might be worthwhile to zoom in a little bit on that track so people can see the roads and understand a little bit of exactly where it is.
Cool, yeah.
It's supposed to.
Can we see that? We can see the
Oh,
Kaiser
yeah, there's
Permanente.
my view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is a neighborhood.
And they're large, the homes there are in larger tracts. They're not close together at all. They're not like Sun City where some of them are closer together. in that area.
There's still homes in there.
Yeah.
It's definitely an area, because actually the auto malls on the north side, you can see the loop of the auto mall at the top.
Yeah,
So this is,
that's the automobile at the top of the map there.
yeah, where
Yeah.
that loop is.
Yeah.
That's, and then the hospital is off to the right, so and then there's still a lot of commercial right along Douglas Boulevard and the old hospital that was down there, it's now not service anymore, but there's definitely some opportunities there that we can explore.
Yeah, well, if you can make the case for it, if you can use your non-linear thinking and apply all the scale and relativity to this data with all the local knowledge you have, then by all means make a case. And then again, you might want to look at the pale blue areas, like you were mentioning some place in Lincoln that you felt was needed support. Let's have a look at that. Shall I go to that one?
Yep.
Okay, let's have a quick look at that. This one here, which one do you want me to look at?
The one on the top is actually good.
Okay, great.
And
Great.
while Eliza's showing you that, if she can go track to track and look at one particular indice and look at it for every single track. So have fun with this. There's a lot to learn about your area pretty quickly.
We can share what that means. So you tell me from this tract, the thing that's clearly pulling it down is healthcare access and transportation. Do you want me to look at one of those?
Transportation.
Okay, great. Let's have a look at transportation.
Listen.
Active commuting is very limited here. Let's look at what that has to do with health. Everybody should have safe, accessible and convenient transportation options to get to work and other destinations. Active commuting by foot, bike and transit creates opportunities for physical activity, provides transportation options for those without a car, encourages social cohesion and reducing contributions to climate change and air pollution. It's amazingly sophisticated how they consider these individual markers for health, isn't it? We should look at this one too.
Sure.
And if I wanted to compare this particular thing, commuting, let's just go back to it for 1 second. Sorry, it takes a while to load sometimes. Yeah, get out of it, then I'll click on it again. Okay, here we go, great. So say we were looking at transportation. And then I wanted to look in transportation in other census tracts around it, or this one, for example, I could compare it. And then you can immediately see the difference between the two tracts. And is there some common denominator? And is that worth creating an awareness campaign with artists around? Got it? Brilliant.
We have a question.
Yes, Janet.
Again, I'm not very specific to map, but there's a lot of retirement areas there too. Is the Sun City region? It's on the other side of the highway. A lot of that vacant land down at the bottom is actually flattened bean. And then when you go up out into the corner, it's all vacant. It's country ranch land that's being developed. Yeah.
Well, there's a
So-
lumber mill out there too.
Yeah.
So you're in Plaza, you're going to need to be creative.
Yeah.
My guess is that you might do well on these more regional approaches, going back to things like fire, air, relationship with that to watersheds and public health, and look at some of those more sort of global approaches together. I think some really exciting stuff could come from it. Let's quickly now go back to the presentation. We wanted to show you how to use this yourself.
With respect to Placer and what you're showing with the dark blues and the light blues, the communities though, are we able to break it down when we take a look at even those that are not dark blue or light blue? Break it down to ethnicities within those areas. Okay, because I'm thinking it is going to be the populations within those areas that we really and truly need to focus on.
So encourage that.
I want to say, no, switch.
Yeah, that's great. We're just encouraging you all to sit in the front so that everybody's faces are captured. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a sort of synopsis from the video itself. And then we're going to create a whole sort of video of about half an hour of our entire listening tour. So when someone says something really important, we want to make sure we catch it. So you're going to have to ask that again.
So what I was saying is within Placer County, to me, the key is going to be not necessarily focusing on those areas that were not blue, dark blue and blue, but the other areas, drilling down within those areas to identify ethnicities, marginal communities. Because I know Placer has Placer County youth. There is a contingency of foster youth who are in need of services. And I believe we do have a location, Koinonia up in Lucas. A big thing. Yes, okay. Yes, so that to me presents a great opportunity to having a project around art, especially if we can find some way to have brainstorming now. Those foster kids express their emotions by way of art and see about helping. So I do believe in Placer County, the opportunities are there. I like the indexing and indices. The work is really going to be to drill down because it's those communities who, while there may be a high concentration of access to education and medical services, health services, if we drill down, it is going to be those who are not part of the dominant group who will need the assistance, or we can find some projects.
And you were on the board of directors for Placer County Arts Council.
Yes.
I might encourage you, challenge you to follow this meeting with perhaps a conversation on Zoom led by Placer County Arts Council locally that speaks to exactly this. Like, do a little bit of your own study about race and ethnicity and the correlation with healthy outcomes or unhealthy outcomes, as the case may be. And perhaps you can help educate from the Arts Council's perspective, also your personal work. It would be absolutely fascinating. You'd be doing the community such a service because we all need help with this.
There is a group, Sierra Native Alliance, helped form a resilient Placer that they brought in a number of organizations, mine being one, to have a conversation with youth, specifically youth of color, around indexes. Can't remember what their title, but it was around indexes, and they wanted to get their feedback. How are you? What are your thoughts regarding to transportation? What are your thoughts regarding education?
Very good. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so that would be great.
I would
to
join
do
that Zoom call. I'm gonna gate crash. So Placer County Arts Council is hereby challenged. And I think that's going to be a marvelous thing that you could lead, and we would all want to attend, wouldn't we? Because we need to learn. This is great. So going back to the big picture, knowing that we don't have that much more time, what are the factors that might consider how much a county or region be apportioned? When we first thought about this, and especially bearing in mind, we're going to be working with our county arts councils or our state local partners. Perhaps the easiest way would be to assign, 170, 180,000 per county. But wouldn't it make more sense, bearing in mind that we're looking at really serious issues that are critical to society and health and all the things that go into community well-being, to look more, to align ourselves more with, apportioning funds according to the density of blue area tracts. And that's where we suddenly realized that actually a regional approach would be just as sensible. So I love the micro piece as well. Like, I think some really good projects can come from that kind of micro analysis of race and the correlation between healthy outcomes, but also be thinking regional as well. And you're going to have to be creative and faster, and we welcome that. But also county population, county geographic size, county tribal and ethnic considerations. How are your tribal peoples doing? Where are they? How can artists engage with them? And how can we make sure those tribal voices are coming through in those projects? Overall proposal strength will be common to all. We must have a strong proposal strength, and then we will provide technical assistance once we release the grant guidelines that this listening session and all our listening sessions are informing. We'll also provide you with technical assistance, and we'll ask our county arts councils to perhaps provide, grant workshops. Maybe there's a great grant writer locally that would like to volunteer their time and lead a grant workshop either here or elsewhere or on Zoom to help artists get oriented around the application process. And then the likely longevity or sustainability of the projects that you're proposing beyond the grant activity period. So picture September 2024, the end of the grant cycle. Will you have produced a project that could be borrowed by another community elsewhere who's suffering from the same issues or needs an awareness campaign that looks similar? Will your project lend itself to being a benchmark or a gold standard, if you like, of excellence? That's one of the things that came out of the WPA 100 years ago, was those kind of gold standard case studies that we still draw upon to this day. So, whoops, that's about the seventh time I've knocked that out during this presentation. And then, of course, bear in mind, just remember when you're looking at this data, there's stuff happening in our communities in upstate California that wasn't captured by the 2020 census, such as more recent fires. A huge piece of news in the area that we were last week, in the very northern reaches close to the Oregon border, that will affect the way communities are thinking about projects. It's the removal of the enormous piece of news about the removal of the Klamath dams.
Yep.
None of this is going to be within the census data, for a few years to come. But I can tell you there are tribes out there who need to be working together now with groups of artists and units of government that are going to be fascinated by this news. It's the most amazing piece of news in terms of its impact on our ecology and environment. And then we're also going to be looking at what size of grant should we offer. And we ask you this now, like, what will be meaningful for a small size project? What's the smallest grant that could create the greatest change? What do artists really need to create fabulous murals or a guidebook for Plaza or a regional size grant? What are we looking at? So this is where, if we were a larger group, we'd break up into just small groups and dream up some projects. Everything that you share will be of enormous value to upstate California more broadly. Think of yourself less in competition and more working in harmony. We want to create some of the best projects we possibly can in California, from upstate California. We want them to come from Plaza. So give us your ideas, tell us what size grants we should be creating, and then us as regional arts councils will be putting our heads together later and analyzing your thoughts. Did anything come to mind when we were talking about potential projects, however loosely defined? Yeah, Barbara.
Just because I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah.
A lot of artists are not very comfortable in life. If they're working artists and not retirees, but even those retirees. So housing for artists is a big thing. I know so many artists on my Facebook page who cannot find affordable housing. I mean, apartments they can afford, and they are working artists, and they're moving out of our community to other communities so they can afford to live and make their art. So that was one of the things that just kind of spoke to me, that it would be nice to have it, because every community is working on low-income housing, that perhaps this would be a work-live type of situation.
Yeah.
That we could think about. I know it's a big project, but it was just a thought.
Maybe bearing in mind this whole thing, the California Creative Corps is a pilot program. And the idea is that we show the state what works for us. And then the state says, okay, let's make this permanent. Wouldn't it be great to be here a couple of years from now saying, okay, guys, it's that time of year again. We're all gonna be applying for amazing artists residencies to create live workspace and conditions that are amenable for artists to create amazing projects of meaning locally. So I love that you brought that up again. It's sort of where we started the housing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that I, as a interior designer, it's something that
Yeah.
when I first started out in trade, housing and scale and size, that's just how my mind works, for seniors. But it's really becoming a big problem.
Yeah, love it.
Sacramento does have a apartment complex for, low-income artists, but it's not specifically senior art housing.
You're thinking for senior because you're
I'm
aware.
thinking because of the fact that as people get older, they're not working and they're relying on their art for income, and they just can't afford to be where they're at. It needs to be smaller.
And I think you're thinking of the R Street Warehouse Artist Loft, amazing project, and they've taken that model and they're trying to apply it in Truckee. I'm sure you know this. And there are issues because you can't just do what you do well in the city and bring it over here and do it over there. And yet it's an amazing opportunity. So how do we make the same things work well, given different community conditions? But I love your thinking. Any other projects? Come on, don't be shy. This is just at the beginning. We know you're going to refine them.
I think access to arts education is a big hole to be filled too. Here at Blue Line Arts, we've been doing field trip tours with grant funding. We've made that completely free for Title I schools to come in. And every single time we are surveying the teachers, asking them, what type of arts integration, if any, is being done in the schools. Elementary schools, especially in this area, there is no designated arts teacher. There's only a volunteer run art docent program that they depend on. But if the parents are all working, then it's not being done. So I'm thinking, some type of artist in schools program, if we're able to train the artists to be those art teachers, that could be a part-time job where they can have more reliable income while also doing their work.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, and this has come up many times, the desperate need for arts education. And of course, you all know that Prop 28 passed,
Yes.
which is unbelievable. Like it's a generational shift.
Yeah, and that's year over year.
Yeah,
Permanent funding.
it's incredible. So there's going to be, I encourage you, it's sort of a bit of a segue, but I encourage you to be positioning yourselves with the local schools, whether you're a nonprofit arts organization, start educating them and letting them know you're here and ready to serve them and with monies.
Excuse me, I just had Colfax reach out to me, their superintendent of school last week, and we ran an ad in our marketing program. And it was a paid position. It was an after-school paid artist and an in-school during the day certified paid art teacher up at Colfax. And I asked him to get back to me as soon as he got his responses. He had 5 responses in 2 days for our ad. So there is a need, and we are, people are seeing that they can reach out to us and we can help them go in the right direction.
That's
So,
fantastic. And of course, that California Arts Council has a sort of ream of amazing youth education programs in the arts. And so when you're thinking about the California Creative Core and you're thinking about education and intergenerational learning, educate yourselves into what, and the Arts Council can help you do this, and what California offers in distinct educational options already. And then how can the California Creative Core program be something different? Maybe it's something connected again with intergenerational learning that's less didactic. It's not necessarily a teacher going into a classroom, but it's bringing families into community spaces that need to be in areas that need to be revitalized, or where the kids don't normally have access to art. And then the learning and the creativity that unfolds there. Does that make sense? So you don't want to ask for monies from this program that are offered through some other grant program already. But that isn't to say you can't get really creative and like, what does intergenerational learning mean? This came out significantly from the WPA program, where artists were going about their daily work under the WPA, getting paid for it. They were inserting themselves into public spaces that were desperately in need of tender loving care. And then slowly, organically over time, these spaces became incredible places for creativity and intergenerational learning. So, yeah.
Well, we do have a raised hand here. Natalie, I'll mute you so you can speak.
Please unmute everyone.
Hi. So some things that we've been starting to work on that I'd like to see kind of flourish into the full capacity is I have a small history class that we're looking at just the different music and art from civil rights movements, anyone who's been kind of, held back in society, and they're going to be also creating their own artistic responses to today's world and what people are going through. We're also we work in the juvenile hall once a week with young people, and we're working on building a music studio to kind of help with some anti-recidivism, because that's kind of the draw of the Hip Hop Congress. A lot of the kids want to be rappers or DJs or musicians of some sort. And so by us building or working on building this music studio, then they can come and do, express themselves in the ways that they need to, but also
Safely, positively.
yeah, and be attached to leadership opportunities and things like, oops, you recorded a rap song and now would you like to volunteer at this fun event? So that's kind of what we're doing, and their music is just really powerful, and them being able to put that out about what experiences led them into being in the juvenile hall, which are a lot of those things that you're seeing on those maps. And we work with existing artists to teach the music production, recording, all of those things. So those are just some things we're working on, like the smaller projects we're working on right now that are just kind of seeds and working towards them.
Fantastic. Can you just remind me of your name?
Auburn Hip Hop Congress.
Yes.
And I'm Natalie.
Natalie, sorry, I lost your first name there. Natalie, are you funded through the California Arts Council's Jump Starts program?
Not yet. We plan on applying for that one.
My recommendation is start with a planning grant. I think it's one of the grants one of the programs that is offered a planning grant. That's how we got started. We were denied, I think, for a couple of years because we were so new to this area institutionally. And so we applied for a planning grant. That gave us everything we needed to do to position ourselves for a good application. Again, I'm challenging you, Hip Hop Congress, to be thinking outside the kinds of work the California Arts Council provides funding for in other programs. I love what you do. It's so obvious that the community values you, and now be thinking, okay, how can we connect it? How can we think out of the box with it?
Okay, thank you.
Don't have the answer, but I really encourage the community to come. Maybe the Arts Council could have a bit of a brainstorm with Hip Hop Congress around this. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Hello. We'd love you to. Are you here for the listening session?
No, we're having 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we have.
I didn't pick up their work. So
Well,
we're about our 1 o'clock.
absolutely. Any last thoughts from people? How big should the grants be, guys? Come on.
Well, we've
I
had,
think it's good to have a variety.
yeah, we've had
so-
great success with all sizes. I mean, from the $500 micro grants all the way up. I'd personally love to see more documentaries. The documentary that the Auburn State Theater did, or the Auburn Symphony did, it was also on KVIE. That 26-minute and I think like 30-second video is perfect for getting national attention on the public stations. So, I mean, I'm a big proponent, as we all know, on social media, which is what I'm mostly in charge of. Video is king, so if we can help to support the documentaries that help our BIPOCs and the indigenous, our underserved communities, those are stories that need to be told.
Thank you all so much. So what's going to happen now is that Nevada County Arts Council will come together with all its state local partners. That's the program that connects us both with the State Agency for the Art and our county board of supervisors through rigorous reporting and everything annually. We'll be putting our heads together, sort of regrouping about what we've heard from you, and we'll sooner or later create the grant guidelines that will then share back out to you perhaps by February. But if it isn't February, it won't be long after. But I'm so grateful for you today. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming, for sharing.
Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful.